Hello Elden Ring fans and welcome back. In this video we're going to have a part 2 on the PvP in Elden Ring and explain why things work the way they do. Currently, this part of the video is going to work and focus on Poise and how Poise should work, how Hyper Armor should work, how it technically all combines together to cause kind of a blend in issue, how it affects the flow of PvP, and why it makes everybody feel like they have sort of the same build, even why people use the same build. You're going to see here, like in this is a perfect example of like a weapon art. Me getting out Poised, he has a colossal weapon, I have a colossal weapon. That's a perfect use for Poise, if he has more poise than me, but he doesn't. That's Hyper Armor activating. But besides that, we're going to get into that, where I punish him with a weapon art in a proper way. I feel like it was very proper. It was very cool. It was done very well. But we're going to discuss how, from like DS3 to Elden Ring, how they completely flipped the scale on that. How Poise was not really existent in DS3 except for during certain actions, like your rolls, your dodging mechanic. But when it comes to Elden Ring's PvP and how it works and the mechanics of it, even during PvE, Poise is a constant thing. The reason why people don't play DS1 or Dark Souls 1 or Dark Souls Remaster for its PvP very much is because, well, the Giant Dad. And for people who don't know who that is, or what that is, it's the ability to wear giant chungy armor, or fat boy armor, or poisey armor that just gives you ridiculous defense and poise. And in doing so, you're able to kind of tank everything with your own armor's hyper armor in a way. What Poise is which we're going to go over. Poise is sort of a, I don't want to use hyper armor as a word to describe it, but it's a inevitable count number which allows you to be hit. And if you have a higher number of that than another person, you will counter out their number, allowing you to basically swing through somebody's R1, basically allowing you to attack without being relentlessly stopped. Now, Poise should not prioritize over Hyper Armor. How Poise should work is if I'm using a straight sword, and they both have equal Hyper Armor, and you're using one, and I decide to attack you, the attack should go through on both, unless I have more poise than you, which means I should stagger you. In Dark Souls 3, there's a lot of stagger. Almost every hit you see, like right now we're fighting with bare fists. I have more poise than him, but in Dark Souls 3, poise is not a big priority. It's more a fashion. You can see that when he hits me, I get kind of stunned, knocked out of the way a little bit. And that is the activation of Poise. But in this game, it's the activation of Hyper Armor. So our fists get the same amount of Hyper Armor. They both have the same amount of stun. And that goes into what Hyper Armor is. Hyper Armor is the almost the exact same thing as Poise, except for Poise goes into your armor. Hyper Armor works for your certain criteria of weapon. So you're seeing this guy, me and him fight. We have a really bad connection. I don't know what's going on here. It's probably that I had really bad internet, but you're going to see that like later on in some videos, I get out hyper armored by spells. When I'm using a weapon, like I should, spells really shouldn't get hyper armor because they don't in DS3. They get no hyper armor unless you're doing what's called poise casting, which lets you equip poise to a weapon, which is just more hyper armor. That's all it is. But enough nerd talk. The hyper armor of the game in Elden Ring should work above Poise. So at the top of the ladder, it should be hyper armor, then Poise. So if I'm using a claymore should out hyper armor a straight sword, no matter what. Like unless I'm one handing, then you can put it at straight sword level or something like that to do balancing. But if I'm two-handing a claymore, I should be able to power through or hyper armor through your straight sword. Just because you have poise doesn't mean I shouldn't be able to match your poise or even destroy your poise and stagger you. But in Elden Ring, that's not how that works. You can have a I'm pretty sure you can have a there's probably a video in here, an ultra, a colossal weapon. Sorry, I call them ultras, but colossal weapons. And you can be using one, and during your startup animation of your attack, when the hyper armor should activate, during the startup, there's the hyper armor doesn't. I guess maybe it's delayed in activation, or maybe it's just too weak. You'll get staggered out of it by somebody who's wearing not as much poise as you. Even then, if they have more poise than you, you're guaranteed getting R1 mashed. And with how parries are, you can't really defend yourself. And it's even worse if you're doing a backstab animation, you're stuck in there, you get hit by the poise consecutively. It can really screw you over. You can have a lot of poise, and my friend, one of my friends was fighting with me the other day. He uses the sleep torch, the St. Trina's torch. And what happens is he sleeps you. But if you have too much poise and he's using a weaker weapon, and by the way, this is some glitch stuff that's going on in the background. It's kind of trash, but whatever. St. Trina's torch, he slept me. But I had so much poise that he was able to use a weaker weapon with less hyper armor, but he has poise still. And he was able to hit me without me being staggered out of the animation so that I could get away. So that I'm allowed to not be punished repetitively. But instead, because of how much poise I have, it actually screwed me over. And what happens is that I was getting R1 mashed, and I couldn't get out of the animation of doing a backstab, or even being slept, or getting a parry. They're able to hit you multiple times without breaking your poise because you have too much. So as you can see in my build, I have 42 poise in some of this. You're like, it's ridiculous. Go test it out with your friends. That's what I've done. We also learned that like the level cap on people, so like his 500 against my 125, which of course it sounds like the 500 should definitely win, of course, but it leaves the ability of skill out because of how hyper armor works, how poise works. Hyper armor is not as strong as poise, so anybody with any weapon can come up to you with the best armor in the game and spank you. They can just bend you over, and I don't know about that. I don't like that. I don't like the idea of being pulverized when I have an ultra or a colossal weapon, and it's slower, yes, but it should have the hyper armor to be able to deal the damage through your straight sword. Now, your straight sword should be fast enough to be able to counteract that. It shouldn't be able to outpoise me or out hyper armor me, but it should be able to stop me or stun me or like have a stun timer, like, you know, where you get reaction hit. But the problem is that it doesn't. It doesn't have that as much, or at least it has too much of it. So I should be able to attack with my colossal weapon, hit you, and eventually you should be able to outspeed me. It should be speed versus slow weapons, and the slow weapons should have a lot more hyper armor so that they can, you know, counteract the speed. But the speed should have, you know, more ability to swing faster. Just being able to swing faster isn't generally, like, speed versus power. Speed's going to win. That's how combat works. But not all the time. If you're a skilled enough player, it doesn't work. But with Elden Ring, the problem is that, like, you're going to see this dude. He's able to just clobber me. And eventually, I think I kill him. I don't know. There's a lot where I'm losing in this video, but it's to show the reality of it. Like, there's a lot of I'm not perfect, but like there's a lot of issues. There's a great amount of issues. Like the activation time on just hyper armor alone, hyper armor not being strong enough on certain weapons, hyper armor being non-existent, and poise just completely overtaking. It's like in this video, it's just like you feel like you're fighting a bunch of lap armor kids, if anybody knows what that's like. But you feel like everybody's repetitively doing the same thing, and they are, because, well, that's what wins. And there's no structure to fighting differently because you can't fight poise because there's no hyper armor in the game. Like, the hyper armor is not good enough on all weapons, on the unique weapons. Like, it's not equal for each colossal weapon. It's not equal for each greatsword. It's not equal for each halberd, and it's not equal for spells. For spells, like, you're doing a massive amount of damage with magic because magic's broken right now. You shouldn't be able to one-shot me. But just because I have poise doesn't mean I shouldn't be able to, let's say, kick you off a ledge. So, like, it's a perfect example. Like, that poor kid in Lap Armor Pro got kicked off. But it's so hard to have fun with the PvP when you can't wear what you want to, still have fun. I mean, I know that there's defense and stuff like that, and, you know, absorptions for particular armors, or particular armors, sorry. But the problem is that, like, the adversity. You're gonna see, I'm pretty sure in a video on here, I'm fighting a dude in a duel, and he's wearing nothing. I am wearing armor. He's literally, I know my poise is higher than his. He's wearing nothing. Even if he had a sneaky ring on or something, even a drink, there's no way he had more hyper armor than me or more poise. But in reality, he uses a spell, and the spell out hyper armored my poise. So we already know that on certain things it's busted. On other things it's not. It just needs to be more balanced on that. That would change the game completely. Like, everybody knows who's played PvP or likes PvP. You typically don't want to fight with like, you don't want to fight an ultra with a slower weapon unless you know you can hyper armor through it, or you can possibly outplay the other person. Typically, if you see somebody with an ultra, you're gonna get a faster weapon. You're gonna get something that you're better with. And the problem is that people are using bleed, and that's a whole nother topic. We'll go in depth on another video on the status effects. But in all honesty, the reason why they're so effective, those weapons, is because either A, they have too much hyper armor, or B, which is really the problem, they have too much poise. The poise of the game is beyond busted. That's why Dark Souls 3 doesn't rely on poise. And I'm pretty sure this is the video I was talking about where I get absolutely destroyed by spells. And I mean, I'm trying to swing. I'm trying to. I know I have more hyper armor. And it just doesn't work out for me. I'm bad, I guess. So it just doesn't work out. But that's the biggest problem. That's why everybody feels the same, because everybody's equipping the same weapon, so why not? It's doing good damage, but everyone has huge poise or way too much hyper armor on something that shouldn't, like this kid. And like I said, I love the PvP for this game. And if you do too, please follow the channel. Please like the video. Please leave a comment. People leaving comments, I will reply. I will try to. I will go through and make videos just like this one for certain people, because it needs to be talked about, and you're not alone. So thank you for watching. Have a good day.